The Irish Sea had never seen anything like it. A floating city, population 2,000. With hundreds of cars and giant tractor trailers stacked below its decks. Named for an Irish literary epic, the super ferry Ulysses is itself a masterpiece. 4 times a day, Ulysses crosses between Ireland and Wales. But when the gales of winter blow across this ancient and dangerous trade route, then comes the true test of the largest capacity car ferry in the world. It could be the biggest traffic jam in Europe. Enough to line 40 city blocks, and it happens here almost every day at 2:30 in the morning. They're boarding the biggest car ferry in the world, Ulysses, all 50,000 tons of her, the pride of Ireland. And this morning, Senior Second Officer Ben Hudson is packing them on.
Stephen, just take him in behind that Arctic there. Some of the passenger pieces, please.
He has only 90 minutes to get everything aboard and secured. And tonight, there may be a record load to place.
Oh, right up. He said right up.
To keep schedule, something must cross the ramp every 30 seconds. This vessel is built to accommodate 240 trucks and trailers, or 1,342 cars, or a combination of both. Ulysses can also carry up to 1,900 passengers.
No. Up to the front.
They come with every shape and story. Some humming with refrigerated goods. Others quiet with hard goods. Some with very dangerous goods. Some with students eager to tour. Others going home for the last time. The shortest distance between Great Britain and Ireland is this route linking Holyhead with Dublin, across the Irish Sea. This arm of the Atlantic Ocean, about 230 kilometers wide, with Ireland on the west shore and England, Scotland, and Wales to the east. An important trade route since the days of the Roman galleons. The Irish Sea is relatively shallow compared to more open waters, with swells that can build very quickly to dangerous heights. It's unlikely that the early Roman traders were loading and departing at 3 a.m. in the middle of January.
This line here, look, pull him up and reverse him back. Pull him over there and reverse him back outside. If you can pull up there and reverse into this line, that's all you have to do. But you'll always get the awkward driver who's not as experienced as others, and he doesn't pull into the lane right, and you have to reverse him back and forward. That can take a bit of time. This is stuff you can't work out in advance. They're what you call curveballs. See, I need you outside. Yeah, not laying there, but I need you over there and get 2 trucks beside you. Where's he going now? Look. Just drive up and reverse back. Do you want me to do it? speaking, we were on time tonight, 4 minutes late, almost a full load. Full load in, full load out. Yeah, it was pretty good going.
All vehicles are chained down. The Irish Sea can be unpredictable at the best of times.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. You're welcome aboard Irish Ferries vessel Ulysses for your morning trip to Dublin. We've completed loading now. ETA in Dublin this morning, 0700. Weather on passage is good. The fresh winds we've had over the last few days have died down for the time being, so it should be a nice, comfortable trip over to Dublin. Thank you.
With that announcement, the world's largest ferry flexes her considerable muscles.
You know, when you're preparing for sea, probably the touch of 8 buttons and the ship is at sea.
Hello, bridge. That's 4 engines running now.
When I started, you went and you did things, you walked away. There was no control room in the ship. You went and you opened the valve, you started a compressor, you started a pump, you closed and opened valves manually. As you see, the whole thing is programmed. It does everything itself.
Four giant thrusters push Ulysses sideways, straight out from the dock. The twin propellers at the stern kicking her forward when she's pointed at the sea. It's the marine equivalent of a vertical takeoff in a Harrier jet fighter. The image of James Joyce, author of the literary masterpiece Ulysses, for which this supership is named, looks on approvingly as passengers head to the bars and lounges for their first taste of Ireland, even though it's 4 a.m. The reason behind the never-ending stream of people and goods across the Irish Sea is summed up by Irish Ferries marketing director Tony Kelly.
We're an island nation. We depend virtually exclusively on sea connections for our goods operating on and off, and be it in terms of our exports or indeed what we consume every day. So very high quality sea ferry connections particularly are critical to this economy's growth and good health.
This growth and good health, stimulated by the European Economic Union, has created a huge demand for bigger, faster, and more frequent ferries. In the late 1990s, traffic to and from the island had increased to the point where it could barely be satisfied. Large new ferries were continually being built and sailed into service, only to find they were soon overrun. Just 3 years old, the biggest ship in the fleet, the 184-meter, 34,000-ton Isle of Inishmore, was unable to meet the demand. The idea of building a much bigger vessel took hold at Irish Ferries. Operations Director John Riley.
So the question then was how big? So I said, well, what's wrong with making it twice as big? So the challenge really there at that time was to make it twice as big as the Inishmore, although at that stage I didn't think it was really achievable.
Irish Ferries were having trouble finding a shipyard that could deal with the concept. People who were prepared to push the design and engineering envelopes to the limit.
We went all over the world initially, then narrowed down to about 5 or 6 yards, and then narrowed down to 3 yards. And eventually we chose a shipyard in Finland called Akafin Yards to build this ship for us.
But the Finnish shipbuilders had to overcome 3 very difficult design challenges in order to be successful. First, the dock at Dublin couldn't be made any bigger, so the new ship was limited to under 210 meters in length. Second, the facilities in Ireland and Wales could provide ships with no more than 2 levels of ramps for loading and unloading, so the extra decks needed to double capacity would have to be added above and below the standard decks. The third constraint was perhaps the most problematic. The depth of Dublin Harbour, a very ancient shallow harbour, would dictate the draft of the ship, the amount under the water, no more than 6.5 meters, leaving a scant 2 meters of water under the keel. It would also mean the propellers would have to be smaller to avoid hitting the bottom and spin at very high revolutions to produce the necessary crossing speed of 22 knots, or almost 40 kilometers an hour.
When we signed up the contract for this, we had developed plans to about, I'd say, maybe 80% or thereabouts, but there were some serious challenges outstanding at the time of contract. And we both took a bit of a risk there that we would be able to solve those during the contract period.
Detailed designs for Ulysses were completed in the spring of 1999, and construction began immediately. With a 50-year history and some 1,500 vessels designed and built, Aker Finyards is one of the world's largest shipyards. But even with its vast experience in the field of specialty or purpose-built ships, this one was a very unique proposition. A car ferry with 12 decks and 4 kilometers of vehicle lane space that could function in Dublin Harbour with only 2 meters of water under her keel. Ulysses was delivered to Irish Ferries in March of 2001. The final price tag, 450 million euros.
The Port of Dublin was developed really for sailing ships, so you're very constrained, especially at the entrance. It's very narrow. Ships of this size now cannot pass other ships in the entrance, so there has to be a certain amount of traffic control. At low waters we have about, in a minimum, 2 meters, which is 6 feet. Not an awful lot when you think of the size of the ship, but it's adequate. Going up and down the channel in Dublin, you have to be very careful of the effects of the wind. It'll push you up to the bank on either side, and then approaching the berth too, you have to be very careful. A side wind, it acts nearly like a sail.
In many ways, Ulysses works hardest when she's tied to the dock, turning around the world's largest ferry load of people, trucks, and cars, unloading and loading simultaneously. Unless the ship could be loaded and unloaded in 90 minutes, half the time usually required for this number of people and vehicles, there would be pure chaos at dockside. The solution was a unique vehicle handling system which could load or unload vehicles on 2 decks and store them simultaneously on 4 decks. From ground level, drops, or trailers without their tractors, are shuttled down an internal ramp system to a lower trailer deck, a key innovation and part of the reason for Ulysses' world-leading vehicle capacity. Once the lowest level is filled, the balance of the ground level deck can still take more drops and trucks. From the elevated level, immediately upon boarding, smaller traffic is fed up a car-sized fixed ramp to a portion of the upper deck. Heavier trucks proceed straight ahead, but once inside, they too can be sent to the upper deck. On the upper deck, Ulysses' 31-meter width makes it possible for even the largest articulated trucks to drive an oval pattern in order to be properly positioned for a quick exit on the other side. Once the upper decks are full, the ramp itself can be raised, lifting loads of up to 110 tons to the deck above. If the mix of cars and trucks coming in is mainly cars, the upper-level truck space with its 15-meter ceiling height can instantly become 2 levels of car park. So no matter what the size and shape of the endless stream of vehicles, Ulysses can safely stow away more vehicles than you could fit into 5 of the biggest parking garages in Dublin.
Cargo as it's loaded is noted by the loading officers as to where it's placed, and these are then entered into the computer.
397, okay, thank you. Got all that.
And then the computer will work out the actual stability of the ship and the stresses on the ship. The ship can't sail with a list, so the weights have to be distributed from side to side in a certain way so as to keep her upright. We do have tanks that will compensate for that to a certain extent, but we still have to be careful as to how we actually load the ship.
The people space aboard Ulysses is also gigantic. And during this critical turnaround and loading time, every square foot has to be washed, vacuumed, or shined. No dust bunny is left unturned in preparation for this morning's travelers. Up to 1,300 people to be accommodated, fed, and entertained. The housekeeping team has 117 twin and single cabins to attend to, with 228 beds to make, all in the space of the ship's rapid turnaround time. Outside, containers of provisions and foodstuffs are loading on for the retail stores and restaurants. From the boarding ramp, passengers walk into the main reception area, a space that would rival a luxury hotel.
302. They're on deck 10. We're looking for you, dear.
Thank you very much.
Okay, no problem.
The cabins themselves offer all the advantages of a typical hotel room, except that food and drink are just one deck up, and a full-blown shopping mall is one deck down. Best of all, they're a long way up from the fuel tanks and other potential hazards dragged aboard by the tractor trailers.
There's a few main areas of danger on the ship, particularly the engine room, galleys, and on a car ferry like this on the car decks. They're very hazardous areas because of the nature of the cargoes we carry.
Those cargoes can be highly flammable or explosive, corrosive or poisonous. But for a lot of ferry captains, the biggest danger has come from an unexpected source: their crews. In March of 1987, a British ferry, the Herald of Free Enterprise, capsized in the approach to the Belgian port of Zeebrugge. It was all over in 90 seconds, and 188 people died. The biggest death toll for a British vessel in peacetime since the sinking of the Titanic. The cause of the accident was human error. The massive doors at the front of the ship were somehow left open.
We have a clam door system so that the actual water pressure is actually closing the door rather than lifting it up as in a visor system. This board here indicates the hull integrity of the ship. All openings in the hull are indicated. The green is for closed, and if any of the openings are opened up, it will show red.
Regulations govern that whilst the ship is at sea and all doors are closed, etc., we must achieve 10 air changes per hour. That means the air is changed 10 times like they are. And in port then, while loading and discharging operations are in hand, then you must achieve 20 air changes per hour.
Once again, this remarkable vessel is locked, loaded, and ready for action. But trouble is brewing. The Irish flag has begun to whip anxiously in a gale-force wind blowing in off the Irish Sea. The captain knows that if the weather is rough here, it'll be worse at the dock in Holyhead, Wales, at the end of a perilous crossing. The world's largest car ferry is about to take on one of the world's more dangerous crossings, facing a gale-force wind and driving snow on the Irish Sea. Taller than most of the office buildings in downtown Dublin, the 12 decks of the supership Ulysses are catching the wind like a monstrous sail. These decks, which can be a liability when the wind blows towards the dock, are also the reason the ship is such a transportation marvel. Deck 1 contains all the propulsion and mechanical equipment, engines and generators. Deck 2 houses the service areas and can also store trailers. Deck 3 is the main trailer deck. Deck 4 carries cars. Decks 5, 6, and 7, more trailer decks. Passenger cars are on Deck 8 with access to the lifeboats on both port and starboard sides. Deck 9 is the first public deck on Ulysses. Among the amenities, all linked by a promenade walkway that encircles the deck, are the many restaurants and pubs, 2 cinemas and a shopping arcade, children's play area, and games arcade. Deck 10 has the majority of the accommodation areas for passengers and crew, with the bridge up forward. Deck 11 is the observation deck with a special lounge for very important clients, the truckers. Finally, on Deck 12, 51 meters above her keel, the communication facilities, radar masts, and a helicopter landing pad. It all stacks up and produces a ship that has a very special place in a famous Irish institution, the Guinness Book of Records, as the world's largest capacity car ferry.
Let go aft.
Let go aft.
Let go forward.
Prepare the second clutch.
From a dead start, the twin 4-blade propellers and thrusters, 1 in the stern and 3 in the bow, force Ulysses away from dockside. The thrusters throwing out tons of water as they struggle against the howling wind. Each thruster has a cross-mounted propeller capable of pushing the full-loaded ship sideways. With such massive propulsion power, the thrusters can turn Ulysses in its own length. Each of the 4 thrusters is driven by 2,400 kilowatts of power, or 3,000 horsepower. That's an incredible 12,000 horsepower. More power just to go sideways than many ships have in their entire propulsion systems. And it's not just the wind that Ulysses must push against. The River Liffey is plagued with strong and dangerous cross currents as well. Knowing that other ships are fighting those same winds and currents just adds to the captain's concern. The River Liffey is so narrow that two large ships can't pass in the main channel.
Attention please, car passengers, you are advised that you are not permitted on the car decks while the vessel is at sea. Situated on deck 9, the Brioche Doré and Boylan's Brasserie are now open. Also on deck 9, Leopold Bloom's Bar and the Grafton Shopping Arcade are also open.
But for the passengers, with the sun not yet over the yardarm, it's time to toast the journey. If there's one thing an Irish sailor or ocean-going trucker never travels without, it's stout. The thick, dark brew that rates as Ireland's #3 export, just behind whiskey and farm produce. The truck drivers, the VIPs of the ferry business, have their own exclusive lounge and dining area on board Ulysses. Some of them will bunk down in the staterooms before continuing on with their truckloads of Irish exports, no doubt lightening the ship's load of one important export by a glass or two themselves.
They're a very important source of income for us throughout the year, winter and summer. And it's very important to keep them happy, because in some cases they have the choice as to which ferry they travel on. So if we can give them the best of facilities, then they'll keep coming back with us rather than with our competitors.
With the added danger of crosswinds in the channel, the Ulysses will give way to the ship making its way into port.
Yeah, if you come ahead there, I'll just hold up here till you're in past the north bank there.
The captain's been in sea service for some 35 years, 15 as a master of various ferries. He takes these tricky maneuvers in stride.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is the captain speaking. We've just cleared the River Liffey there now. We're held up a little bit with traffic in the river. However, it shouldn't hold us up too much. We should arrive shortly after 1 o'clock this afternoon in Holyhead. Weather on passage, unfortunately, will be a little bit rough. There's a southerly gale blowing at the moment. Thank you for your attention. Hope you have a pleasant trip.
The captain's calm demeanor in the face of a severe winter gale is rooted in the absolute confidence he has in the ability of his ship to make a smooth crossing. Other vessels joining Ireland to the United Kingdom will not depart today. They're worried about passenger comfort and shifting cargo in the aggravated sea state. But Ulysses was designed and built for just such a voyage and will forge ahead into the treacherous Irish Sea right on schedule. The crew of the supership Ulysses are on station, monitoring all systems, alert for any malfunction, ready to respond to orders from the bridge. At twice the size of other ships in the Irish Ferries fleet, and carrying a full load of cars and trucks, Ulysses needs a lot of power. Especially now, punching through a severe winter gale and waves that are reaching the 10-meter mark at a speed of 22 knots or nearly 40 kilometers an hour.
You're looking at massive propulsion power, which is very unusual for a ferry. The engines are the biggest of their type, and there's very few of them around at the moment. They're a new engine.
The Ulysses is powered by 4 Caterpillar M43 engines, delivering a total output of 40,000 horsepower. The engines drive 2 main shafts at 500 revolutions per minute, attached to individually controllable 4-bladed propellers. By way of comparison, the propeller on the world's biggest twin-hulled oil tanker only spins at 76 RPM.
the amount of fuel that you carry and the amount of fuel that you burn to get the ship from A to B is quite staggering. We steam for about maybe 9-10 hours a day, and in that time we'll use 70 tons of fuel.
At $100 a ton, that amounts to some $7,000 per day, enough to gas up the entire fleet of trucks on board.
Is he finished with the fort yet?
TV cameras monitor the engine and generator rooms. Computer screens and gauges feed back information from hundreds of electrical and mechanical systems.
Switch that off.
It all adds up to an immediate picture of sea state, stabilizer deployment, engine performance, and level of ballast.
Start to the pumps.
For the captain, the only thing more troubling than a storm at sea is a fire during a storm at sea.
All hands to emergency stations. All hands to emergency stations.
Crew members from the vehicle handling decks regularly perform fire drills during the crossings. A section of the vehicle deck is set aside just for this purpose.
Car deck 7.
Okay, let's go.
Putting out a gasoline fire is something you learn to do in record time on a ferry carrying well over 1,000 cars.
Damage control, bridge, got that, bro.
Got that now. Yeah, very good. Everybody accounted for.
With the pretend disaster taken care of, the captain can turn his attention back to the troubled sea and the howling gale. At 209 meters long and 31 meters wide, Ulysses is as big as 2 Irish soccer fields. Stretching well past a wave cycle, she avoids much of the sea's pitching motion. And by taking on seawater and literally sinking down, the ship can also reduce its tendency to roll.
10.
Computerized pumps automatically shift ballast water from port to starboard holding tanks, and sensors are programmed to manipulate the whale-sized stabilizer fins.
Well, the ballast system, without using any figures, we can take several thousand tons of ballast in. And if the ship is light in the water, we can bodily sink the ship to give it more stability. The lower the ship is in the water, the more comfortable it is, and the more stable it is. So as the ship passes through the water, the stabilizers are extended. They're actually facing down. But as it passes through the water, if the ship tends to roll to starboard, that stabilizer will tend to go that way. So the water pushes the ship up on that side. This one is going that way at the same time, tending to push the ship down on the port side. As it comes upright, they'll even off, and then they'll go the other way to stop the roll going to port. And they tend to just keep it in as an upright a position as possible. Well, a ship like this with passengers and freight on board, it's very important for comfort and safety that everything is kept in as upright and as stable a position as possible.
If there's anyone on the observation deck who's concerned about the war of the elements raging outside, they're keeping it pretty quiet. In here, it's all about the beer.
And as you can see, it's fairly full. At this time of the year, it wouldn't normally be this full, but there was a big rugby international on this coming Sunday between Scotland and Ireland, so we're anticipating a very, very busy trip.
Maintained at a perfect temperature, kept under the right pressure, any of the ship's 5 bartenders can pull a fine glass of brew from an elaborate series of lines, piping the much-admired liquid from a central storage room to taps in all the bars and lounges. And if the brew should prove particularly stimulating and someone gets their Irish up, well, there's even a fine old place where tempers can cool off for a bit.
Creature comforts in there. This is the ship's jail. This is where any unruly passengers are brought. There's not many creature comforts in there, and I would say if you were put in there once, you would not want to return.
Waves are approaching the 10-meter mark. Visibility is down to less than a kilometer. Crew members below decks, more alert to the possibility of a disaster than the shoppers and snoozers on the upper decks, stand ready to respond to commands from the bridge.
Okay, Val, thanks very much for that. Is he finished with the port yet?
There's always two people on watch in the engine room at any one time, monitoring. Once the ship is moving, once it leaves the berth, the watertight doors are closed, so that if something happens in one compartment, the water can't get into the next compartment. The vessel can survive in an upright condition with two adjacent compartments flooded. So unless you've got a gash running maybe 40, 50 metres, you probably won't broach more than two adjacent compartments.
Holyhead, Wales is moments away, but it's hardly a safe haven. Once Ulysses enters the harbor mouth, the most perilous part of the journey will begin. Because handling this huge vessel on the open sea, even when a gale is blowing, is child's play compared to bringing her safely alongside a dock in a small, windswept harbor. The largest car ferry ever to visit Holyhead, Wales is entering the harbor. The sea state is rough, and that fresh breeze is gusting at 120 kilometers an hour, made more treacherous by its constantly shifting direction. One wrong move will spell disaster. The drama being played out on the bridge is not even noticed on the rest of the ship.
Okay, Jerry, thanks.
Passengers are getting ready to return to their vehicles. The bridge is preparing for a very tricky procedure. A procedure that has been done many times, but not when the wind is blowing a steady 90 kilometers an hour. That's a very powerful force pushing this giant vessel in directions the captain does not want to go. The slightest mistake and Ulysses will crash land, creating a lot of damage, not to mention long delays for its passengers and freight.
You've got that now. Yeah, very good. Everybody accounted for.
Further into port, the captain calls for a tug, reserve power and assistance against the wind and its uncertainties.
The other critical factor in all of this, of course, which is not a system, but a key factor, is the person who controls all of these things, whilst the ship is at sea, but more critically, while the ship is in closed quarter confinements, like a port and berthing, and our captains are the people who manoeuvre the ship and who dock the ship. And they also are a critical factor in the success of our service. So when you talk about the coordination that it takes to two propellers that can go ahead and astern, two rudders that can go independently, four thrusters, and the coordination of all of those things by one person on the wing of the bridge during a docking manoeuvre can be a pretty daunting task, but I'm glad to say that we have excellent people who do it very well.
80%, relative breast 160, on the brake.
15 feet.
15 feet astern, 1-5.
This is progress by degrees, small increments of power at the appropriate time. The tug is added to the mix, nudging against the port side. Now the captain really has his hands full. 2 propellers that can go ahead and astern, 2 rudders that can steer independently, 4 thrusters, plus a tugboat acting as a 5th thruster. The ability to coordinate all these things as he stands on the bridge wing is what puts the ocean ferry captain in a class by himself.
10 feet astern, 10. 5 feet astern, 5.
Carefully monitoring progress, considering the tide, the currents, remembering the winds. Below decks in the engine room, professional tension, watching every system, ready to respond instantly. As well, there are docking crews to alert, to secure the lines as Ulysses closes in on the dock.
3 feet astern, 3. 2 feet astern.
The wind has turned again, not pushing directly against the port side, but slightly angled, and all of a sudden the ship has moved too far ahead.
Big enough,
The first consideration is not to be going too fast, approaching the berth, to make sure that you have control at all times. Not to lose control is the main thing. And to have a little bit up your sleeve that if anything goes wrong, that you can give her the boot.
Well, we've been dragged ahead with 5 feet astern, 5 feet.
A final test of nerves for the captain, as an investment of $500 million flirts with a wall of solid steel and concrete.
2 feet down.
One final adjustment to keep the pressure on, to equalize the effects of the wind, to achieve a perfect docking after defeating a near-perfect storm. Safely docked in Holyhead, Wales, the world's biggest car ferry can empty its cargo of cars and trucks, and the race to the marketplaces of Europe begins anew.
Over the last few years now, well, particularly since Irish Ferries took over here, we've been getting progressively bigger ships all the time. And each time we thought, well, can't get any bigger, we don't need a bigger one, but here we are now with the biggest ferry in the world, so anything bigger than that, I don't really know.
The ship, since it was delivered, has done its business very well. Its metre, its schedules. We haven't had any technical or even weather-related cancellations since she started service. It's making its trips to schedule, turnarounds, manoeuvring. All of those characteristics are matching the design criteria.
The reaction has been absolutely fantastic since she first arrived on the scene back on that very sunny day in Dublin. And we still have the buzz. A year later, we're still absolutely buzzed by the vessel.
It's vitally important that we keep Irish ships on the Irish Sea, and particularly crewed by Irish people. Being an island stuck out on the western edge of Europe, although we are part of Europe, it's essential that we keep ships like this under the Irish flag.
especially when the Irish flag is being battered by the winds of winter, and the supership Ulysses is the only vessel with the ability to keep to schedule, delivering the imports and exports that are the lifeblood of Ireland's growing economy.